Today we're comparing 3 of the best robot vacuum and mop combo units in the industry. Now when we do these reviews, we make sure they're extremely comprehensive. So yes, it's long, but we're making sure you have everything you need to make a great decision for you and your family. You'll see today that we put these units through some of the hardest tests, and this has resulted in some really different results than you might expect when we compare the best in the industry. Now there's time codes in the description so you can jump around the video if you're wanting to know about a specific aspect. We've included a link in the description to all the products to purchase, plus an additional link to a spreadsheet where we put all of the specifications, the tests, and the results from our comparison. We do that so we don't have to talk about every nuance, but if you're really trying to make a decision, download that sheet because it has every detail we could find or test. Now let's get into the review by giving you a high-level basic breakdown about our 3 contenders. First up is Narwal's Freo X Ultra. It's their flagship robot vacuum and mop unit, and you'll find it for around $1,200. It has a maximum suction of 8,200 pascals, and it features a downward mop pressure of 12 newtons. It'll store up to 7 weeks of debris on board, and it does so with a neat little compression feature. That feature keeps its dust contained all within the device and keeps it from being very loud. It also has a zero tangle roller brush, and I can confirm that it actually works as I've had this for 6 months now, and I have yet to find anything caught in that brush. But the real star of the show for Narwal is its mopping. The base station houses both a clean water and a dirty water tank, as well as floor cleaner you'll have to buy from Narwal, and it'll dispense the water and cleaner, suck up the dirty water, clean and dry the mops, and it's easy to maintain. In fact, the mop cleaning system is one of the best I've seen, and it means those fancy triangle rouleau mops will go around your home for longer than is stated by Narwal. It's also a really quiet unit in almost everything it does, and it has a fairly large battery and a pretty great app. Roborock's S8 MaxV Ultra comes in around $1,800 and is their flagship today. Now, the S8 MaxV Ultra features a flexi arm side brush and an extra side mopping pad that helps it to do edges and corners of your home. It features the highest suction power of the 3 units in our review today, and its base station does everything you want with clean and dirty water tanks, washing of mops with warm water, and more. But its real strength comes from its meticulous nature. It has really good navigation, and it can identify objects around your home. It rarely gets stuck, and it does a great job vacuuming carpets and cleaning around those objects as it moves carefully. It has a lot of storage for your floor's tiny friends, a lot of battery power, a lot of water storage, and just generally is ready to do your entire home with some of the best specifications in the industry. The Roomba Combo J9 Plus is the cheapest option of the 3, but it comes with much lower suction power, a smaller battery, and it features navigation technology that's now a few years old. The funny thing is, if I had done this comparison just last year, the other 2 wouldn't exist and this would probably be the top, but technology updates have left Roomba behind. Now it has a huge storage capacity and its mopping is underrated, especially when using a specialized super clean mode that can be very effective. Its strength comes from its integration with other platforms and its integration with voice assistants, but its app is very different than these other 2. Now Roomba has been an industry leader for a long time, but you'll see some ways that it fell off as a company and needs to do some work. But is it worth it versus the other 2? Let's find out. We'll start with how these clean. We standardized our tests in the following ways when it comes to cleaning. Now, number 1, we let the units clean up a mess 2 times, and number 2, with both Narwal and Roborock, we let them use their AI feature, which means they will determine if they need to go back. You'll also see that there are moments where we can talk about other robot vacuums like the brand new S10 or another vacuum from one of these companies. But if you have a question about another model, go ahead, ask in the comments. I've tested a lot of these. Let's start with mopping. Now, there is a clear leader here, and it's Narwal. You can see our results on screen now, and I'll explain how this happened. But basically, there are 3 big reasons Narwal leads here. Number one, the design on Narwal is better because of the rotating mops. Those are packed with a lot of water and provide good downward pressure to your floor. Both Roomba and Roborock use a vibrating pad option, and while that might sound fun, it isn't as effective as Narwal's design. Those vibrating pads just don't push down hard enough, and they definitely don't deal with larger spills. Number two, Narwal has that AI feature. They call it Dirt Sense, and it allows them to determine in real time how dirty your floor and their mops are. That means they kept going back to messes without our interaction. We didn't find Roborock's AI feature of the same sort working half as often as Narwal, and this meant they left a lot more messes on the floor. Now, Roomba tries to do a similar thing, but their dirt detection system only affects how they approach the next vacuum or mop session. They basically feed back to their app when they're done a full run, whereas the other two are trying to decide as they go around your home. Now, number three, since Narwal decides when their mops are dirty, they go back and they wash them. Again, we didn't find Roborock doing this, and it meant that both they and Roomba spread messes around our home. Now, the biggest surprise to me in this section is that Roborock, in many tests, fell to third place. Roomba would get a higher percentage of the mess cleaned up, and we found that Roborock was unable to deal with sticky messes very well. Now, the reason Roomba outperformed Roborock is really simple. Roomba just runs over the area multiple times with this pattern of moving forward and then backing up, so they hit the same spot 3 times in many cases. They also have what's called a super clean mode, and you can't use this mode for larger areas, but it does raise the level of cleaning if you do use it in a small area. Now, the robot vacuum moves incredibly slowly when you're using that, and it'll put a lot of downward force on your floor. It'll sit there and mop and vacuum for minutes at a time in the same spot. Now, that's not something you're going to use very often, but it is useful at times. It also has some drawbacks that I'll explain more when we get to navigation. But navigation is the big problem with Roomba, and it's just a random unit. That's where they fall off in terms of mopping and overall cleanliness. Certain parts of our floor just weren't cleaned in many of the tests. Now, a lot of you will be wondering about SwitchBot's new S10 or the roller types of mops that you've seen on other units. Now, I recently tested the S10 and I can tell you that it had similar results to Roborock. The biggest problem with those rollers is when you have height differential in your floors. Things like tile are a really big problem because the larger roller can't get into those lower parts of the floor. Now, I want to show you the biggest examples of the mopping differences. You can really see how much was left when we put a substance like Nutella on the floor. Yes, this is intended to look like your dog had an accident, but you should see the differences between the three here really clearly. So in mopping, it's a clear win for Narwal. When we talk about vacuuming, our results get much closer. There's a few reasons for that, but for me, it comes down to one thing. Roborock leads this by a little bit because of their meticulous nature and their overall higher suction power. You'll see that in terms of general maintenance, there just wasn't much visual around our home after a normal everyday run, so they all perform well. The reason Roborock scored a little higher here is because they were really slow and careful as they went around objects. And this was especially important with carpets. Now, Roborock and Roomba sense that they have come onto a carpet and they actually raise their suction power automatically. So it's a nice combo with Roborock. But I will tell you that Roomba doesn't score very high here because they're missing a lot of the floor. This was a big problem with mopping, and it's a big problem all over the place. Of course, we took it to another level to really test out these units. During their tougher tests, Roborock fell off a little. They had trouble when they would turn a corner after going over a large mess. This isn't something that you will deal with every day, but again, we didn't find their unit going back out very often, and they would leave these sweeping lines as they turned. Every robot vacuum did that a little bit, but these guys were worse in our test with salt, and they actually didn't do great with flour either. But all three of these robot vacuums went through those tests with really good results. Almost every time, a second pass would result in 90 to 95% of the mess being cleaned up. In the end, we see Roborock leads by a little bit with vacuuming, mostly because of how they handle carpets and navigation. Narwal comes in as a close second, with Roomba falling off again because they can't drive. Now, for your home to be truly clean, you need those edges and corners to get cleaned. Both Narwal and Roborock do an initial clean of the edges and corners of your home. Then they'll go through the middle with a back and forth pattern. Now, this result surprised me a little bit, and I had to create a bit of a mess around the edge of my home to really test this out. But Roborock, they have that little flexi arm sweeper and the little mop that sticks out on the right-hand side. This was a big marketing deal, but unfortunately for them, it's not as effective as what Narwal is doing. Now, Narwal uses their main mops as they swing the backside of their vacuum towards the wall. That means they get right up against the wall and they're using their main cleaning unit. The little arms from Roborock just aren't as effective. So while these are both great, there was a bit of an edge for Narwal. When we talk about Roomba, I mean, they aren't even doing the edges of your home at first. And in fact, they don't go along the edges very often. They miss a lot. It's kind of a disaster here. For the most part, you're going to use the vacuum and the mopping features together. That's the real power of these units. And so when, just like Captain Planet, we combine our powers, we get some different results. Roborock and Narwal basically get to the same level of clean, but through different methods. Narwal has a near perfect mop and a great vacuum, while Roborock has a near perfect vacuum and a good mop. In terms of general maintenance, they're both rated the same. I can't really find a difference in how clean your home is going to be. I will say that personally, I like how my floors look after a mop cycle with Narwal. It just doesn't feel as satisfying or quite as clean with Roborock, but that's not something I can prove, or at least I haven't been able to find a way. But I went and I created a really crazy mess with honey, flour, M&Ms, rice, and milk. But this was to test where these units would falter, and we have some interesting results. Now, the leader was Narwal, and I think it comes down to the fact that the mopping is more effective at cleaning your home. What I found was that Roborock and Roomba had spread things around the floor. There was a little bit of this from Narwal, but only in the immediate area of the mess. It was the effectiveness of their mopping system that kept the mess contained and cleaned up more of it. What we found with these other two was that flour was spread around the floor quite a bit, and we also found that Roborock had left a lot of the honey around. There's a few more details to this, but just understand that our scores are telling you how much of the mess was cleaned up. But we need to talk about Roomba because they didn't actually finish the test. Basically, it quit. It couldn't get moving because it was too dirty, and between the sensors and a design issue with these wheels, just the way that this moves around your home, it wouldn't even move for me. I took a half an hour. I tried to clean it up. I tried to work with the app, and even scarier than it giving up after that is that the next part of this test goes even worse for Roomba. Now, admittedly, this is too intense of a test to worry about for most people, but what it's showing you is what will happen over time as these units get dirty. We'll address some of this as we get to the maintenance and longevity section in today's video, but let's get to what I'm going to call the scary truth. This is what we found after we had completed all of our testing, and it goes to the cleanliness of these units. You're not going to believe this. One of the most important aspects of cleanliness is how they look inside. Let's go check these out. Now, the first thing to note is in front of these. So this is Narwal. There's not much in front of this. There's a little bit in front of Roborock. You can kind of see the edges here, and you can see all around this one. It looks pretty rough here with Roborock. Let's pull them all out. hard to pull that one out. Ooh. Hey, no going anywhere. Nope, just sit there. Now let's get this guy out. Hey, nope, just sit there. Just sit there.
Vacuuming started.
No, just sit there. Now, I just finished all the crazy testing. What I do have to do is pull that out. Okay, wash it off. That's all I gotta do there. Here's Roborock. Now this front piece I can pull off, but in here, these are not things I can get out of here. So this is a little bit stuck. It's gonna be a little bit messy to deal with over time. Inside of the Roomba, you know, nothing comes out of here. You can't pull out any of this. So unfortunately, you've got to get in here, clean it out. With Narwal, one of the nice things that they've done is you can pull that out. Now, it's not super nice to look at, but you should be pulling this out every once in a while, and that generally will keep this unit clean. Let's look at the units themselves. Now, keep in mind, I have had Narwal for 6 months as we do this. Now, I'll say two things. This, you know, for this to be 6 months down the line, there's barely any dirt on these mops. They're obviously a little older now, but this is really good. We've got some things on this roller brush, but you're not noticing any hair caught in this. That's really important. And I'm not seeing a lot of the rest of the unit very dirty. In contrast, when we look at the Roborock, you know, we're not seeing any hair caught in here. I'm not going to expect a ton, but it is a much dirtier unit around in general, and there's a lot of wear and tear on this mop already. And I will say, this mop is wet. And that's a really important aspect. So I left this overnight. This is still wet. That's not good over the long haul. These are completely dry. This is very important. You're not gonna have a bunch of bacterial growth here spreading that around your home. This is a big deal. In terms of Roomba here, you know, it doesn't actually look that bad. The wheels got really bad here. The rollers look pretty good. They've done a good job keeping that clear. I'm not seeing any hair caught in here again. But I do notice the sensors right in here got a lot dirtier than the other units here. And this actually caused me a problem where I could not get the unit to actually finish a big clean. Same thing with this mop pad. So it's still really wet in here, and you can even see it's wet on here. So this is a cleaning requirement for you. You're not going to be able to leave this, and that is not a clean pad. It's not getting that clean at all. So for my money, when I'm looking at what I have to do, there is almost no maintenance to do here. Eventually I've got to replace this. Eventually I've got to replace some of these little sweepers and things, but it's keeping itself pretty clean. As dirty as that was, you can see I just spent 2 minutes cleaning that out, and now I just slide it back in there. It's in there, and now you can see how clean it is. This is a single wipe and we're done. So I could take this off and you know, you just clean this up, but that's it. So there we go. This is all cleaned up. It looks nice, but what I've got left is in here and around the base station now. But that's a nice, easy, clean method. It's just I don't like that I got to get in here, and that there's so much around here. Like, this is kind of gruesome. Now, I thought I would uncover just how these things look. Now, these all went through the exact same tests, okay? This is what's in Narwal. This is what's inside of Roborock, okay? And these sweepers are pretty, these rollers, they're pretty dirty. And this is what's inside of Roomba. So, I don't know which of these two is worse, but you don't want that moving around your home. This is much more reasonable, especially for the level of cleaning I've been doing. So just in the end, you know, from a summary perspective, the Narwal is easy to clean, easy to maintain. You just have to replace some components every once in a while, whereas these two are just not keeping themselves and even the base station very clean. So there's a clear preference for me in terms of what I want driving around my home. Like, look at in there, guys. Yikes. The way these vacuums navigate around your home is really important, and it's definitely the second most important aspect of any robot vacuum you buy. Now, the reason I say that is because when you miss a part of your home, you're leaving it dirty. So in terms of general maintenance of your home, all three of these vacuums do a pretty good job of navigation. Now, I say that a bit tongue-in-cheek because I've mentioned a few times that randomness with the Roomba is a big issue. The problem with Roomba is in the technology being employed. Both Roborock and Narwal are using LiDAR, or laser-based navigation, plus a front camera. They're combining those to understand in real time what's around them. They're also using it for object recognition, which is very important for how they approach each object. All three of the units have good drop sensors or cliff detection. None of these are going to fall down your stairs, so they're good that way. But Roomba calls their navigation system Precision Vision, all one word, which is, a silly name because it mostly doesn't work. Now, it uses the camera on the front to determine pretty much everything, and they even guarantee on their website that they won't run over dog poop. In fact, they say that they will replace the unit, and I'm betting they replace quite a few. Now, just look at our results. Basically, Narwal and Roborock are nearly perfect when it comes to navigation. They don't get stuck often, they follow a good back and forth cleaning pattern, they do edge and corner cleaning remarkably well, and there's a little edge for Roborock with their little flexi arm getting into corners better than Narwal does. But when it comes to objects on your floor, they just kind of treat those a little differently, with a benefit stemming from each of their individual methods. Narwal approaches objects very slowly, and then they make minor turns to get around them. They don't really bump into objects, and that results in them getting very close and cleaning around things. Roborock tends to test. They'll push the object a little bit, and sometimes that means they get into the area where the object was, but in most cases we found they just took a wider path around the object, and that would mean they missed part of the area, but this only happens with objects that weren't there the last time they came around. But I feel the need to address the problems with Roomba, as there are 4 massive problems. Number 1, the area we were doing most of the cleaning runs in had a kitchen table in it. Now, we moved that to do our cleaning tests. However, even after 20 plus runs, Roomba still assumed the table was there. You have to remap if you move something in order for this to not assume that it's still there. Then it misses little spots, and it's a huge maintenance issue. Number 2, it's not processing in real time very well. It basically goes around your home, running into walls and objects. It leaves the Roomba with dents and smears, and I'm sure walls will be damaged. This affects how it looks very quickly. My unit looks terrible already. Number 3, in the previous section I said that Roomba wouldn't finish our huge mess test. It gave up and it couldn't move. Kept reporting back to the app that it was unable to find the base station. This is a problem that you can find in Reddit posts about Roomba. Basically, it pushes too hard on the ground with the mop in some cases, and it causes less traction. Then the unit can't move. And this happened even with just a few situations where I had wet floors or where the wheels just got really dirty. There's even a maintenance item to replace the caster wheel on this unit, and you can buy the other wheels. So obviously Roomba knows this is a problem, but it's going to cost you. Now, number 4, it uses the light on the front to determine where the base station is. I've had it get lost during this process multiple times. Whether it's that the unit got too dirty or something else, I don't know. But in 2024, you shouldn't find your robot vacuum lost. There are a few nuances to how these navigate that do matter. Now, I touched on this with Roomba and their inability to recognize that my kitchen table had been moved. That issue affects Roborock a little bit, as they will assume that an object is still there after they've identified and placed it on the map. Now, what happens is they identify those objects, they place it on the map in their app, and the next time they go out, an assumption is made that that object is still there. They will plan their route to go around that, and that could mean that they'll miss a small area if, let's say, your kid put a backpack on the floor. It'll go away the following time because when Roborock gets back and they didn't find that backpack there, it'll be removed from the map. So it's just a little bit of a delay. I don't think it's a big deal. The bigger deal is how often these units get stuck. There are only a couple of situations where Narwal or Roborock will get stuck otherwise, and they're a bit different. Now, Narwal will once in a while get stuck around legs on a high pile carpet. And the funny thing is you could just hit the play or the power button, it'll continue on. Doesn't happen often. Now, Roborock sometimes gets stuck in tight corners. If I had a table leg or a couple of objects close to a corner, it could get caught. This happened again around a handful of times over our month-long testing, so it's not happening a lot. And the final nuance is one that you might like or you might hate. Now, Roborock's navigation on carpets is really meticulous. I've used that word a few times because I'm not a thesaurus. It just takes a very long time to get around certain objects. I saw it take 3 to 5 minutes regularly to get around things like tables when on carpet. That's great for cleanliness, but we often found the time it took for Roborock to do a clean of our home to be almost double that of Narwal, and usually 1.5 times of what Roomba takes. When you buy one of these units, your first big task is to get them set up and installed in your home. They're big boxes, they can be difficult to deal with, but the setup and installation process is fairly similar. You unpack everything, set out all the components, install things like the little sweepers, maybe your mopping pads, plug in the base station, and fill up the clean water tank after a quick rinse. Then place the specialized cleaner inside of the unit or inside of the compartment provided. And yes, each of these companies have their own cleaning solution that works best with their products, and you do have to buy those or else you will void your warranty. Other reviewers might tell you you can use something else, but I'm going to be very careful about that in this video because I want your unit to last a long time. Now, in case you were wondering, here's a quick breakdown of everything you get with each of these units. Narwal's water containers are a little bigger, but they have nice handles, and so do Roborock's. Each of those have a location for you to put the cleaner, but I didn't like Roomba's method because you're doing the mixing of clean water and the cleaner inside of their water jug, and it's just an awkward thing to fill up. But otherwise, all three of these, getting to that point was pretty much the same. However, when you start the app setup, things got a little rough. Now, I've set up Narwal 3 separate times, and I even reset up the unit here in my home for the purposes of this test, just in case my current network setup is a problem. Narwal has a very simple setup process. The app has worked all 3 times for me perfectly. Once you're set up, all 3 of these units have the ability to be sent out by using push buttons on their base station or on the unit themselves. The neat thing with Narwal is they have a little panel, and it has a few more functions on it, and it's a little neater to look at. Roborock was a big pain to get on my Wi-Fi. I had to run the setup process a lot of times, and I actually had to change network settings, including eliminating my 5 gigahertz radio and changing my DNS server. Now, the 5 gigahertz radio thing is okay, and many people will blame me for that because they'll want something to pick on me for, but the DNS server change is a wild thing to have to do. Many people won't know how to do that, and this is part of an official help file online. There are many reports online of people having connectivity problems with the Roborock in 2023 and 2024, so I didn't have an isolated incident here. The good news is, since that initial setup, Roborock has been connected to my network and has been perfect. Now, Roomba had a lot of problems for me too. There's a lot of bugs in the app, and there's a lot of connectivity bugs between the base station, the Roomba, and the app. Now, the basic setup actually went really well, but when I put the water container into the unit, it told me it wasn't there. Then it told me the vacuum bag wasn't in either. And then I had to turn off the unit, turn it back on a few times because it told me it was no longer connected to the base station. I've also told you that I've had trouble with the unit navigating back to the base station. So the communication between those two things and the app just isn't done well. So for setup, Narwal was the best, but I think these are all things anyone can get through, and you can find good tutorials, and there are good help files online for all three of these. Now after that, you have to send the unit out to map your home. This is related to navigation, and so we found very good maps from all three of these units. I will say that it's annoying Roomba purposefully bangs into your home during this process, and they even say that to you in the app. They did come back with a good map though, so I guess I'm okay. Roborock's mapping was fantastic, and honestly, so was Narwal. We did have a little issue where the map showed a little gap where our couch was, but that was corrected on the first cleaning run, so I have no concerns there. One thing you might notice with many of these laser-based units is that they'll see out a patio door and create a new room outside of your home. I wish they would give us the ability to delete those rooms, but the good news is it doesn't affect how the unit works. They don't try to get outside your home, although I've never left the door open. Now let's move on to the app and the maintenance and really get into some of the details that will affect your cost over time with these units. I did a pretty detailed look through everything. And here's what I'll say in general about maintenance intervals and the overall costs. The accessories needed are pretty much the same, and the actual cost over time will be fairly close. I did a yearly total, and the expected costs came out to be very similar with a slight lead to Roomba. There's going to be little nuances to that depending on your home and how much you're using things, so check the spreadsheet, think about your own situation, but it's actually the everyday maintenance where we find the biggest differences. Narwal and Roborock both run a cleaning and a drying cycle every time they mop. That means those come back in good condition, but Roomba recommends you clean the mop every time, and from what I saw and what is currently on here right now, you better do that because it's filthy and it sits right up against the top of the unit, so it just stays wet and it never gets cleaned unless you do it. Of course, that's buried in a user guide. Now there is more storage capacity in the dirty water bin that Narwal has, but honestly the interval is about the same between Roborock and them because Narwal uses more water. Now the storage for dirty water isn't a thing with Roomba, so you don't have that job, but it's kind of weird that you don't. Now from a vacuum storage standpoint, I ran into a really funny situation because people will usually tell me, hey, I want the base station to have that storage. It's usually a pretty loud process, and eventually you have to throw away the little vacuum bag that's in the base station. Now the neat thing about those bags is that they close when you remove them, so you don't get a big puff of dust. But what surprised me is that Roborock and Narwal have the exact same interval for disposing of the vacuum debris. They have the same volume, and that's because Narwal runs this little cycle where they compress the debris inside of their vacuum. Now Roomba does have a couple more weeks of storage space, so if you care about that, that's a big benefit here. But it's interesting because given the same amount of storage space, Narwal's method is better because it's quieter. So the other thing that's really interesting is you can buy a storage compartment instead of a bag from Narwal, and then you'll still have to replace the filter, but this gives you an option to eliminate vacuum bags entirely and then just deal with that compartment. So from a daily usage standpoint, these are all fairly similar. When we move to a monthly look or even a yearly look ahead, there's a couple of big ticket items that you got to pay attention to. You're going to have to clean those base stations with Roomba and Roborock. And you even have to disassemble this little maintenance brush every 2 months with the Roborock. That's not a huge deal, but it's obvious to me that this is a pretty big problem with Roomba. They even sell a replacement base station for $250, and because I think a lot of people will struggle to get that station clean, I can see replacements happening at 3 to 5 years. Now, I don't have as big a concern with Roborock because they're doing that sterilization process with the mops, but that is a concern if you're maybe not gonna do that task as diligently every month or so. Now, the other thing that was really interesting to me was what was available from a replacement standpoint. And I think all three of these have done a pretty good job of making sure that you can remove things like the caster wheels, get those cleaned out. The other big wheels are harder to take out, but I noticed that iRobot sold those, and then it's a fairly easy replacement task. Those are big benefits over the long haul if your plan is to keep your robot vacuum for a long time. I don't see that with the way Narwal and Roborock are built, but I also don't see myself needing to replace the big wheels in those units. So it feels here like if you're treating your unit reasonably, those two are just going to survive. Whereas I did see those wheels already breaking down, things already degrading with these tough tests with Roomba. Now, anything maintenance related is shown inside of these apps, and we put it in our spreadsheet so you can see the intervals, and that's how I did the calculation for a yearly cost. Of course, depending on your home, your maintenance costs will be slightly different, so figure that out, okay? Now, when you look at those pages in the three apps, you'll notice that the diagrams are very good within Narwal and iRobot's app. The benefit to iRobot here is you can tap on a button and buy the replacement item right there. Now, Roborock's diagrams for doing this work aren't very good in the app, but they do have good support diagrams inside of their user manual and on their website. Now, aside from the maintenance that you'll need to do with these units, there's just an aspect of things wearing out over time and an actual discussion that we need to have around longevity. All I'm really able to do here is point out where I see major gaps. The fact is, all of these are built fairly well. Roborock and Narwal are extremely well built, and Roomba is a really replaceable unit, as in you can replace most of the components. One of the biggest reasons that your robot vacuum will fail or won't work for you anymore is battery life. Now, you have larger batteries with Roborock and Narwal, and they have longer stated running times. Now, I was able to find aftermarket replacement options for Roborock and an official version for iRobot. Right now, I can't find a replacement for Narwal's battery. However, I did find their older units have a replacement battery. It looks like they're all using the same thing. So my guess is that there will be one in a little bit, because right now, X Ultra, it's only 6 months old and nobody needs a battery. Now, the biggest issue for your longevity will be that battery, and it is likely that you will start to see degradation 2 to 3 years into the battery's life. Now, with Narwal and Roborock having longer stated working times, they'll probably work to clean your home a little longer, but this is something you should take into account when you buy a robot vacuum. If it says it can handle 1,500 square feet, understand that 2 years from that point, it might only get 1,300 square feet before it needs a recharge. But here are the bigger gaps that I see when it comes to longevity. Roborock's little arm on the sweeper seems fairly easy to break, and in fact, there were multiple times that the unit told me that the little arm was getting stuck already. I don't think this is ready to break or anything, but I think it will wear down and could become a problem. It could be broken by an animal or a small child in your home. Roomba has a very similar thing with the little mop arms that swing down to put the mop underneath the unit. Now, I do think those will break at some point. Unfortunately, both of those little arm components from both of these units worry me because they potentially mean the end of the unit. Now, I think Roborock could get away without the sweeper for quite a bit, but Roomba would lose its mopping function entirely without that little arm. I also think it's very clear that Roomba will break down with the wheels, and you're gonna have to replace those quite often if it's getting stuck, like you saw with the big mess we had. And finally, Roomba is going to break down faster because it's constantly bashing into things. It's already showing the wear and tear, and I'm sure that will eventually cause me additional issues. The base station could also break down, and that would be the end of your unit, but I'm not hearing or seeing any major issues from any of these stations. They all sound like they have a good working water system, and I noticed that all of them, when there isn't water, they don't try to run the pump. As I said earlier, Roomba again shows a bit of an issue with their sensors because both those water tank and vacuum bags incorrectly reported a few times that they weren't connected right. And I guess if I was to pick on something with Roborock, I could point out that the little spinning component that cleans the tiny mop pad could break down, but I think that it's fine. Again, I think those little arms are the bigger concern with this unit, and hopefully they're never a problem. I thought I'd start this section with a statistic instead of my opinion. Now, I took a look at the app ratings in the stores. Google Play Store, iRobot has a 4.1, Roborock has a 4.7, and Narwal has a 3.0 rating. Now, that sounds bad for Narwal, but I'm not sure it's reflective of the situation with X Ultra or their Freo units. I'm gonna have to give you a little backstory here. Now, the first robot vacuum from Narwal was called the T10. That one did have some connectivity issues, and it actually has its own app. Now, people are finding the Narwal Freo app and trying to connect that robot vacuum to this other one, and they're failing. So the other issues I see in the reviews are related to minor features that are actually complained about in these other apps reviews too. So I actually think it's mostly the T10 thing that is causing this app a lower rating, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It's those little features like creating a secondary map or creating a room split and not having it work out exactly the way you want it to. In a lot of cases, people just need those things pointed out to them, and then they'll find out that the app is fine with all three of these. So really the big difference is that people are struggling with connectivity of a robot vacuum that shouldn't be connected to this app. But when I do an actual comparison of the apps myself, Roborock and Narwal are actually very close, and they are the same format as most other robot vacuum applications. It's kind of an industry standard the way they do it. But there are a few differences. Now, number one, Roborock's room splitting feature is a little better. Narwal doesn't allow you to split a room in one way that Roborock does. And I do think Narwal needs to address this eventually because, you know, homes go in both ways. Number two, Roborock has more settings for adjusting how the robot vacuum works. They just got a bunch more. And number three, they have two features that no one else has. It's remote viewing, allows you to drive the robot vacuum around and look through the camera. And their voice assistant named Rocky, which allows you to tell the unit to go out and clean certain areas of your home. I can tell you that, hey Rocky, doesn't always work, and usually the unit misses the command like it just did. It usually takes me a couple of times to get it to say that it's ready, but then it works flawlessly. The big difference is in the iRobot app. It causes you to work with the unit in a different way, and I don't personally like it, but there is an element of simplicity. It's basically task-based, and you have to create a new task every time you want something slightly different to happen. The problem with this is if you have a mess suddenly, you end up creating a new task. The good news is after you create a task, you can favorite it and it's a simple button press. But I actually don't like that I'm missing the view of the map from the main page, and it's obvious that having to create a new task every time you have some little issue in your home is an annoying thing. There's also not a lot of settings. I think the only real benefit to iRobot's app is that it has the store right in it. You can buy those maintenance related items right there. Of course, you still have scheduling. You still have all of the basic functions you need, which is why it's still rated fairly high in the app stores. Now, there are a couple of nuances of the apps that I want to point out because they are interesting features that might affect your purchase decision. I don't think this is a big deal, but Narwal does have a 3D map. They'll actually show you where the unit is inside of your home with that. It makes it a little easier to look at, but it doesn't change a lot. Now, Roborock has this neat feature where they will let you specify the times that your robot vacuum can charge. It's essentially allowing you to avoid peak power pricing, which is nice. Now, both Roborock and Narwal have the ability to schedule a do not disturb time. I think that's important because it'll keep the units quieter when you want them to be at night. With Roomba, I don't like the fact that I have to manually refill the water tank on the unit and empty the debris. This happens most of the time with the debris, but it always happens with the water tank. Sometimes it does decide to empty what it's vacuumed up, but I don't get why those buttons have to show up in the app at all. It should just do it. Now, connectivity to other applications and systems is less important when it comes to robot vacuums, at least as far as I'm concerned, because you're mostly going to use the scheduling function in the app or just send them out when you feel your home needs a clean. But I do want to show you that there are some differences. Now, all three of these will connect to Amazon and Google, but there are some additional options with Roborock getting Siri shortcuts. And Roborock and Roomba have a few more options for connecting to smart home hubs like Homey and Home Assistant. It's also nice to have iRobot's ability to send the robot vacuum to specific rooms or to take on specific favorited tasks. And you can do that through Amazon's voice assistant, and that's a pretty big benefit for using these in that app. Now, Roborock also has their own Amazon skill with a couple of special features. Here you can see that there are some additional triggers for starting routines. They're based on maintenance, device errors, or the state of the robot vacuum and what it's doing for cleaning. It's a nice additional option for those of you who want to know when things happen with your Roborock and want the rest of your smart home to react. For some weird reason, since I'm not doing the work, the sound that comes from these robot vacuums can be annoying. I think that's the definition of a first world problem. But you can see the ratings for noise levels and when each of these units are a little noisier than the other. In general, I can tell you that the way Roomba sounds is more annoying than the others. It truly sounds like a vacuum, and at times when it's driving around, it kind of sounds like a small lawnmower. Both Roborock and Narwal are pretty quiet when they're running. Of course, you have to turn them up to full suction power and down to the quietest suction power to really know what they're capable of, but generally, they aren't very loud. I did mention this earlier, but Roborock spent a lot more time out in my home cleaning. And while we generally found the cleanliness of those two units to be very similar, the extra time spent out there might be annoying to you sound-wise. The last thing is how they sound in the base station. I always find it fairly shocking to hear the units that do the suction out of the robot vacuum into the base station. It's a much quieter situation with Narwal because of that compression cycle that they do instead. It's just a few moments of your life, but sometimes that sound makes me jump. So otherwise, I don't find the mop cleaning and drying cycles to be very loud. These are pretty quiet. I don't mind either of them. Now, there's just one more aspect to talk about before we get to my final recommendation, and that's the size of these units. It is slightly different, and we did find that when it properly navigated, the J9 could get into some smaller spaces. It's not a big difference between the other two units, but this is something you have to check based on, like, if your couch or your bed frame are fairly low to the ground, these might not get under it. The bigger component is the base station. I think the size differential isn't that big here, and so over the long haul, you're not going to care that much, but do check again the size to make sure that it's going to fit where you want to place it. In terms of where you want to place that, because you'll be bringing water back and forth, one of those tanks will be dirty water. You probably want to put it somewhere in your kitchen so you can dump it down the sink or near a door where you can get it out of the house. But when I look at the base stations, there's a pretty big difference between the look and feel, and this extends to the way the robot vacuums look. To me, Narwal's gear looks very clean and simple. The Roborock's base station is clearly made by a tech company. And listen, I'm no decor expert, but it's just kind of gonna stick out a little more. I actually think Roomba has a fairly good design with their station, but that depends on whether you like a little faux wood. Either way, my preference for look and feel is Narwal. It's just got those smooth, round, bulbous things going on that I just, you know, I can't say that on camera. But Roomba is definitely the smallest unit, so some of you might have to go with this. Okay, we've been through all the sections, you've seen all the scores, you can go download our spreadsheet to get those extra details, but here's my final recommendation. It's pretty easy to eliminate the Roomba from most homes. Yes, you're gonna save money versus these other two, but the big point of a robot vacuum and mop is to save you time. The other big point is to clean your home, and quite frankly, you're going to be spending a lot of time maintaining the Roomba, and you'll be spending time because your home isn't as clean as you want it to be. So you're going to end up cleaning. Now, it has too many navigation issues. It's going to break down faster than the other two units by a lot. So to me, it comes down to Narwal versus Roborock. And the fact is, both of these units are really close when it comes to all of the ratings that we produce. When I started the work on this video, I thought Roborock was going to be much further ahead than they ended up. And in fact, I had joked with a member of my team that the video would be called, "This is why you spend more money to buy a Roborock." But I haven't landed there. There's a few poignant moments for me in this. Think back to the big mess that we cleaned up and how Roborock struggled with that. I don't like the fact that the salt test went poorly for them either. I don't like the fact that when I turned over the unit, I found a massive amount of what it had picked up still inside the unit. I also don't like the fact that I have to clean that base station more than I have to clean Narwal's. So there's an edge for Narwal in terms of cleanliness, and that edge gets really big when you consider that clogging issue that could potentially happen on Roborock. Now, the edges in navigation for Roborock are so minor, and the other edges that they have with the app and the connectivity to other platforms, plus some of those little features like the voice assistant, just don't matter to me in the long run. If they matter to you, or if your home is totally full of carpet, then you might want to look at spending the extra money with Roborock, but otherwise, I don't think it makes sense. If you're just trying to get your home clean, then I think Narwal actually does a better job, and I like their attention to detail with the cleaning components. There's a real sense of professionalism when it comes to cleaning your home with this. And I'm not saying that it's not there with Roborock, but the price difference has me leaning clearly towards Narwal for most people. I hope this video has helped you. Now, if you still need the spreadsheet, go get that. Get clear on all the reasons we came to these conclusions. You're also going to see all kinds of specifications that honestly these companies tried to hide, but we go out and find. Otherwise, the links are all down below for the different units, and if you enjoyed this video, you might want to watch our other comparison videos that are on screen now. We have video doorbells, LED strips, and many other types of smart home products in that playlist. Otherwise, thanks for watching today, and of course, live smart.